And we're live. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
The band is back together this week.
Good to be back.
Yeah.
Good to be home.
Yeah. How was your trip?
Very good. It was quick and kind of fast and furious. We covered a lot of ground, 4 states, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, and back in like a few days. So
Sounds like a lot.
one of them we just drove through. But
Yes.
yeah. Anyway, it's good.
Yeah.
Got to see family, got to hang out, got to see my mom and dad, and hang out with my siblings and my nieces and nephews. And a lot of fun. Ate a lot of good food. Yeah.
Good food.
Nice.
I like good food.
Speaking of good food,
Yeah.
I think the best burger easily in Central Oregon we found yesterday
Oh, did you now?
at a truck called Americana.
A food truck.
Yeah.
Americana.
Yeah.
What was special about this burger?
Well, it was.
Wow. That's
Yeah, burger. Careful, Brent.
American Bergen.
It was a smash burger.
I
But
thought-
everything
Yeah.
about it, like every aspect of it, is legit. So I saw on a thread someone had just moved to like Central Oregon and asked, "What's the best burger?" And so and consistently you had Willie Burger
Yeah, Willie Burger.
and
I've been there.
Americana over the top of it. And I was like, "Well, I gotta go." Like Willie Burgers.
Willie Booger.
we're just
Willie
gonna
Burger's good.
Willie Bugger.
It's gonna be an interesting episode. And but Americana got like way more shout outs.
Huh. Where's
So
it
me
at?
and Carrie were like, we gotta go. So they just moved to that truck right down by that health store by the old mill. You know what I'm talking about?
Market of choice.
Market of Choice. It's right behind Market of Choice in that.
Oh, like in the Podski? Is that where it is?
Yeah, sure. That's what I would guess.
Yeah.
Don't know what that is, but
It's a food truck lot.
It's
called
in
the Podski.
go give this.
Yeah.
It was good, and their fries too were just delicious, man. So this is the place,
Best in Bend.
Wow.
in my opinion.
It's
Really?
not far from where I work, so that's going to be pretty doable for me.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's open more than Willie Booger. So,
They also have in the Podski a food cart called Thailandia. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
I didn't see that one. Thailand.
Maybe they're not. I haven't been there in a while, so maybe they've moved. But
Yeah. Well,
anyway,
yeah. Go give it a shot.
all right, Americana,
It's good.
and a cool name, Americana.
It's legit.
Who doesn't like Americana?
Yeah. But the trailer doesn't look proper. Like it's fluorescent green with like
yeah.
no markings on it.
That's weird.
It's like, okay. Looks like they sell like guacamole.
Vegan
Americana.
food.
It's legit.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Yeah. What else has been going on? Anything else we need to update on?
I don't think so.
Weather's changing.
It's
fall,
cold.
Fall is in the air.
It's cold, man.
Somebody messed with the thermostats in the building. That's got me upset, but I'll
You
be
were
all right.
only gone for 3 days. I don't even know what happened.
Leave them on auto, people. If you're listening, don't mess with the thermostats. Keep them on auto. All right. I'm done.
There's a lot going on
That's the end of your rant.
Yeah.
in the buildings now. So,
Well, don't be. I'm going to put locks on these things if I have to. Don't make me lock them up.
yeah.
I will.
Somebody changed them to cool. Like a couple of them were set to cool.
Yeah, it's like it's cold
come
out.
on.
Yeah.
We're just, what are we heating the outdoors? That's what I feel like. I feel like the old grumpy man that I grew up with.
Well, we haven't had warm weather for like a week and a half, so I don't know why we
Yeah.
would have had to.
right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
But my thought
I'll
is
be all right.
that to get Wi-Fi thermostats, that way we can control them from anywhere, anytime.
You might be onto something.
Yeah.
maybe it's the guy that hacked Pastor David.
Yeah, if you got a weird email about
Maybe it's the imposter,
Pastor David needing money because he's in a prayer session.
the code lead
It was
pastor.
fake.
That was not real.
David. Yeah,
They're getting creative though. That's
someone's sending some stuff out. They're not succeeding, but
that we know of.
not that
Yeah,
we know
yeah,
of.
that we
Maybe,
know
maybe,
of.
maybe.
I haven't gotten any gift cards yet, but I'll keep. The person. Yeah, no, just kidding.
Yep.
Anywho.
Anywho,
Yeah.
Take off.
Should we get into our topic
Sure.
for today?
do you remember? Did you used to listen to this band?
Well, that's not our topic today, but our title, Boys to Men.
But you can
It's our
see how
topic,
You
too.
can see how we segued.
That
that.
is our
yeah,
topic.
that was
And it is a good
It was a
segue.
good segue.
I did not listen to that. Band.
Yeah, I would not say I was into them, but there was a period of life where it was hard to avoid hearing Boys to Men.
Yeah, I agree. Was that in the 90s?
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, they were on, did some movie soundtracks.
Boy band?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad that neither of you listened to them.
Yeah. You?
No. No, I'm
what
glad
I-
that none of us.
That's what I would have expected
No,
you
we
to
all
say.
we all did good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a good title. I thought you guys came up with a creative title.
Yeah.
Good title.
Yeah, so we watched a video this week from I was going to call him a disgraced pastor, but he's probably
Oh,
not. Is
it
that the right word?
Ruslan KD was
Well,
the one
Ruslan
to put out
KD
the,
played
put
a
out the
clip
video.
of a pastor of whom we don't often speak.
Yeah, his
Yes.
name. We don't say his name anymore.
Yeah, so do we want to say his name?
I wouldn't.
right now. Just
No, Chad.
okay. We're just
Did
whetting,
you not hear what David
whetting
said?
people's appetite.
MD.
Anyway, just had some good stuff.
It was
to
a good
some,
clip.
some good encouragement.
This guy
to
is
young
always,
men.
like, to his credit, has always been, he always focuses on the man and the man's responsibility, and
Yeah.
that's one of the things I've always appreciated about him. And
Yeah.
this was just a good clip that had to do with, men being biblical men.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of
This
six,
could have been
six
this,
things.
from the clip that I saw, by the way, could have been a sermon given on a TED Talk by a non-Christian. It really wasn't necessarily. It had to do with Jordan Peterson could have said what he said, and I would have agreed with it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like as far as like a gospel centered, that's not
Well,
what it was.
The gospel wasn't preached. It wasn't gospel centered.
No.
But it is a biblical worldview as far as men and why we see some of what we see going on.
Yeah.
I mean, the Bible's right when it comes to roles and authority that's
Right.
established in the succession of authority. And
I guess what I'm getting at is that you
No,
can
I-
have
I-
somebody who's like, this is to me as a disqualified pastor, shouldn't be doing this anymore.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And yet he can still say something that benefits us.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
So even though it wasn't like somebody we would recommend or
No.
necessarily even look to for sound teaching anymore, what he taught in this particular
Oh, yeah.
thing. And that's
Yeah.
what even with the guy that had the YouTube video goes like, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate mail for
Yep.
even mentioning
Exactly.
this guy, but this was pretty
Yeah,
good.
but
And
there
I-
was
and
some
I-
truth.
It was
that
pretty
spoken.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It is a crisis.
Yeah, and we're at a time in society where just God's design for human flourishing is under attack in
Yeah.
every way. Gender roles are under attack in every way. Marriage is under attack. Family is under attack.
Well, we've seen the breakdown for a long time, right?
Right.
In our country. So
Right.
it's been kind of a slow burn.
Right.
And
the burn's
this,
not so slow anymore.
No, but like when you're looking at this subject and the reasons why, it makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Why it's been a slow burn and why we find ourselves where we find ourselves
Sure.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I have an unpopular opinion, maybe like in the nonprofit world. So I serve on a nonprofit board, social services, and those kinds of things. And kind of my unpopular opinion is that most of our ills in society, I think, can be linked back to like the breakdown of the family.
Yeah.
Just about every ill in
Yeah.
society can be somehow traced back, and in particular, fatherlessness.
Yeah.
And so it starts with men walking in the role and the design that God has called them to walk in. It's easy to to feed people or to house people or to clothe
Yeah.
people and to count it and to say, look at what we've done. But like, how do you fix the breakdown of the family?
Yeah, that's
That's a
superficial.
far more
the
daunting
clothing. Yeah.
task, right?
Yeah. I think you made the comment during that at one point, like, fix the men,
Yeah.
you'll fix the problem.
Right.
And
Fix
I mean,
the men, and the men will fix everything.
That's
else, was the
a whole
comment.
nother conversation in and of itself, but like there
Right.
is a certain amount of truth to that.
Yeah.
Like you fix what's going on here with this group of people,
Right.
and it's going to change so many other things.
Yeah.
He
Well,
also
absolutely.
threw out a stat. And I don't know if it's true or real. I mean, I didn't fact check it, but he said basically, if you want to be raised in without a father, America's the best country
Yep.
for you
Yeah.
to do that in statistically. Like
I think you're 300% more likely,
likely.
Three hundred, yeah,
to not have a
300
father in
times more
America
likely.
than anywhere else in the world.
Yes.
And I'm a little skeptical of that.
Yeah.
But it's like even if it's remotely close,
Even if it's half of that, even if it's
that
150%.
was alarming.
yeah.
Yes.
Super alarming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Bible speaks to all of these things, and God has given
That's-
humanity a design.
That's
in
where a
which
biblical
to
worldview
flourish,
is
right?
present in what's
Yeah.
being talked about. Yeah. The gospel, maybe
Yeah,
not.
and
but-
as a society, we spend so much effort and energy, fighting God's good design and what God said is good,
Mm-hmm.
and we see negative results
Yeah.
because of it.
yeah, we sit around going, "You got this wrong." You know what I mean?
Right.
So we do it our way, and then we figure out eventually that we got it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully we
We got
figure
it
out
right.
eventually.
Yeah. Not everybody.
Yeah. So in this clip, there were kind of 6 points to be made, and so we just want to talk through those 6 points. And so the first one is that in our society today, men are encouraged to be boys or girls, but not men. What do you think about that statement?
True. True or false? True.
It seems like there's been a kind of a pendulum swing to a different extreme. So you've got kind of the John Wayne toxic masculinity thing that was pretty prevalent in the 50s and 60s. And there's something about the macho man that,
Yeah.
we all remember that kind of thing. Well, I think there was this kind of a kicking against that to where now we swing to almost like an effeminate version of a man
Sure.
that is supposed to be like the answer to that, and it's just created a different problem.
Yeah.
I don't think either extreme is correct.
Right.
But you've got now like
But you're right. When we see dysfunction in one extreme,
yeah.
then I mean the answer is always to swing all the way to the other side
Yeah.
and see what happens.
Well, and I think you've got young men now that are afraid to be looked at that way. Like, I don't want to be looked at as toxic or part of the, the problem as far as what men are. So I'm going to, kind of disguise myself as this whatever. I don't know. And I'm sorry, but some of the stuff I see right now and like, that guys are doing, again, it's always been there, but it's like, what is going on? Why are you dressed like that? What are you putting this on for? What are you wearing? It's just odd that it's this there's always been like people that have done that, but this is like, it's pretty mainstream now. And it's kind of odd, but
I go into like Macy's once in a while to buy a pair of pants, and I just look around at like what's in the men's section, and I just think, no, like
That would be my first question: is why are you going to Macy's to look for a pair of pants? Jim? No, I'm just kidding.
and that right there is why you have a problem.
right. I kind of walked into that one. Yeah.
Was the Bon Marché closed? I'm just kidding.
Oh, that's a blast from the past. The Bon Marché.
They became Macy's. Just to add
did they?
insult
Did
to
they?
injury.
I didn't know that.
Macy's bought them. So.
Oh, yeah,
Same-
we had a Bon
same
Marché.
thing.
This might have been before your time, but when Ben had actual shopping malls, there was the Bon Marché was in one of the malls. So
There was, you guys know the Kevin Sorbo actor, the guy that was
Yeah.
Hercules. So he's now does Christian movies and stuff, and he says Hollywood is like canceled him because of his religious views. But he just came out and made a statement basically coming against the feminization of men and actors that we uphold as these kind of sex symbols and stuff like that. And he's like, what are we doing? And he called out one guy in particular that's I think is Timothée Chalamet. Is he's kind of a really thin. I mean, it's just funny. When you kind of think of who used to be considered sex symbols, and who is now, and it's definitely there's a shift.
Sure.
yeah. So, I think this same pastor that made these 6 points we're talking through years ago wrote an article titled "Boys That Can Shave," and the whole premise of the article was that like we're stuck in adolescence.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know where this idea of adolescence came up, but like maybe back in like 50s and the 60s, like you were a boy and then you were a man.
Yeah.
And there wasn't this period of adolescence. And so now we have this period of adolescence that's for an indeterminate amount of time. That
It's gotten bigger.
right. Yeah. I mean, you could be an adolescent.
it's still growing.
in your mid 20s and into your 30s.
Well, I would say it used to be like when you graduated from high school and then you were not through with college yet. There was this period where you were figuring it out.
Yeah.
And you were working towards something, but it was a pretty short period of time.
Yeah.
And now that's just grown into an indefinite amount of time.
Yeah.
It can be through your 30s. It can be into your 40s. It's just kind of different.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, what is biblical? Like, how do we define biblical manhood? And we probably don't have time to just fully unpack biblical manhood. But like, when you think of biblical manhood, what are some things that come to mind immediately?
Good start.
I was thinking of a couple characters, of the Bible. That's kind of what came to mind.
Such as?
Not like a verse, but like
Who do you think of?
You're thinking of David, dude.
Yeah.
Homie just goes out and handles business with a giant, and just like a G.
Yeah.
You just go out and do your deal, man. So
Yeah, I would say first off, masculinity, which is something to be celebrated by, that God has done. When he created man and women, he said it's very good. So masculinity and femininity are both amazing things, gifts from God.
Different, but both
not
good.
to be apologized for, but to be celebrated.
Yeah.
And so the idea that, and again, the way you define masculinity becomes an issue because it doesn't mean that you like to go kill things with your bare hands. Even
Right.
though,
Yeah.
It
The idea
just-
is you're a protector.
Yeah.
provider, protector.
You're going to go to
lead.
bat for those that you love.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so,
Absolutely.
it doesn't mean that your muscles are big or
Correct.
your beard is really large, Chad.
Yeah.
It,
It helps.
At least I've got that going for me.
It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt.
it doesn't hurt at all. It's an intimidation factor.
All right. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a protector, but I like responsibility is what it could come back
Sure.
to, even with what David was doing. Like you feel responsible, you assume that role of responsibility, whether it's a people group or whether it's a wife and kids, which means you're going to go out and you're going to do what needs to be done to take care of things.
Right.
Right.
Even the idea that you're not dependent upon you're not a burden to somebody else to like, whether it's the
Sure.
government or your parents or somebody else. You've now taken on this role of
Yeah.
provider, leader, you're responsible, that kind of thing. But ultimately, Jesus is always our example for I mean, he was fully God and fully man, so
Right.
we can't completely emulate him. But when I think of like what it means to be a man that pleases God, you got to look to Jesus,
Sure.
Yeah.
who was meek, humble, loving, kind,
compassionate.
wept,
Responsible.
and yet,
Even for things that weren't his responsibility.
Right.
but as far as all the masculine things that we just talked about,
Everything.
he had all of that.
Yeah,
It's
all of that.
Jesus.
And
Yeah.
sacrifice was, sacrificial.
Yep. Yeah. Took care of those he loved.
Yeah.
One of
Protected
the
him.
points that the guy made in this clip was that one of the reasons that men get up and go to work every day is because they have a group of people that have his last name attached to them that he's responsible for.
Yeah.
So he
they-
takes that
yeah.
seriously and gets up in the morning and does what needs to be done.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys thought that way.
Yeah.
When I first had my kids, I remember when Gage was born, our first child was born, I was 19. I was irresponsible. I was kind of like coming off drug use and heavy adolescence, And the second I held that kid in my arms, like I had that feeling, like this kid's got my last name,
Yeah.
and this is my responsibility. Like he's got my full attention. I'm going to do whatever I need to do, no matter
Right.
what, to take care of this kid. And so there was this weight of responsibility that and commitment, like full commitment, and it just seems like that's completely lost these days.
Well,
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
think we're going to get into this, but that's why
We are
some
gonna get
people
into this, yeah.
avoid getting married and avoid having kids.
They
because-
don't
Right.
avoid hopping in bed
No,
with girls,
no,
but
not
they
at
do
all.
avoid getting married.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
But they avoid it because of that very thing. It's
Yes.
like, I don't want to have to deal with
Yes.
this
Yeah.
responsibility. And,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you touched up on this, Brent, but one of the questions I have is why does God's design for manhood matter? Right. So God has designed manhood to be what it is, designed womanhood to be what it is. They're both beautiful. They complement each other. They both matter. But why does God's design, especially for manhood, matter?
I mean, I think when you think about what society is and the way he's built it to work, men taking up that mantle and it's essential. It's critical, mission
Yeah.
critical for things to work. Even what you guys just already landed on the conclusion,
Yeah.
in order to fix this, men need to start being men again.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the answer. I mean, you take that out of the equation and things aren't going to work the way God intended them to work.
Right.
So it's just mission critical for society.
Yeah. I listened to and this wasn't a Christian clip, just something in my feed one day where someone was railing against toxic masculinity, and then one of the responses was like, toxic masculinity is what built the world. And obviously we're not advocating for toxic masculinity, but just this idea that men, fulfilling their design and role given by God, built the world. And that's not to take away, from women or femininity in any way whatsoever. It's just that God has designed men for a certain way, just like He's designed women in a certain way.
Well, it's clear that women can do these things. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not like that. A woman could be a CEO of a company. She could raise a family on her own if she needed to. But again, it's not the way God intended it to be. Is it doable? Sure. Is it better to do it the way God intended it? Yeah.
Yeah,
And I don't think we don't need to apologize for that. This is something to be rejoiced in. That
Right.
thank you, God, for making it the way you did. And
Yeah.
and it,
Yeah, absolutely. The second one is that men are not launching. Men are not launching. What do you think? What do they mean by that when they say
Failure
men are not
to
launching?
launch.
What we've got here.
Is it what we
to launch?
is it what we now call adulting?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, they sit around. I think he was saying vaping and smoking video games, smoking video games, and playing vape.
While eating their smash booger.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just struggling today.
we're going to need a translator.
I'm just having a hard time today. Yeah, they beat their kids for a long time, so they're not putting childish things away when it's time to put childish things away.
Yeah.
So they're not launching into things that they should be obviously like stepping into.
Yeah.
Like things that have to do with responsibility.
Talk about childish things for a second. What does it look like for a young man or a boy coming into manhood to put away childish things?
I don't think it means you have to put away everything that you enjoy. It
Sure.
just means that you're first and foremost doing things that are necessary. Like
Yeah, it's your priority.
you get your priorities straight, right? And so go ahead and, I'm 50 years old. I'll hop on a video game still once in a while. You know what I mean? After I do my chores.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like. But you got a lot of guys who are building a whole lifestyle around those pleasures
Right.
and the childish, endeavors. And so they're never moving into something that benefits society.
Yeah.
That the Ruslan guy had a clip from a guy. I don't know who the guy was, but he's a successful entrepreneur that he admires, and he was basically talking about how the younger generation now believes that until you find your passion, there's no point in doing anything. You got to
Right.
find that thing you're passionate about, and then you'll really enjoy your work and stuff like that. So it's almost like we do the same thing with a relationship. You got to find your soulmate,
Right.
and then eventually you can go and get married. But until you find that person that's going to complete you, or
Well,
that
the
job
truth is, we
that's
do
gonna
that in the
complete you.
church too.
We do.
This
Oh,
is
yeah,
something that we
absolutely.
use when it comes to ministry. Like people are trying to figure out what their gifts and their callings are,
Right. So they sit on
and
their
why
hands.
God has installed them. And we're always saying, well, usually what you're passionate about. And so I get the carryover, but that's being taken to a whole different level secularly, right?
Well,
It's basically code for like, be happy. Don't do anything you don't feel like doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Which isn't biblical.
Well, I think his point was somewhat that people sit on their hands until they find that. Well,
Yeah,
the
for
truth
sure.
is, you're not going to find that until you start to experience. You got to go out and get 2, 3 jobs, figure out what you're good at, what you like. Maybe you will find something you're passionate about. But even in church, there's so many things you can do to serve before you find your calling or your gift. And it doesn't mean you don't do anything.
Yeah.
But it seems like that might be part of the issue that why guys aren't launching.
I was reading Genesis 3 this morning, where God hands down the sentences for the fall, to Satan, then the woman, and then the dude, and the one to the dude is like one of your biggest penalties is going to be that you're going to labor in pain.
Work's going to stink.
Yeah.
Work's going to stink, but it's something you're going to do. Like work wasn't a result of the fall, like work was pre-fall, but
Yeah.
now it's going to be
made
laborious.
harder.
Like it's going to be painful. Like it's going to stink. But the bottom line is that we all have a responsibility to go out and work as men. And we don't just do it because it's enjoyable or it's a passion or it's something we feel like doing. We do it because it's part of life.
What's weird to
Yeah.
me is that we've created a society where it's optional.
Right.
I don't even have a category for not
Totally.
working. I've never once thought that was an option. I remember just 2 jobs, 3 jobs to
Right.
support my family, whatever it took. There was no scenario where I sat on a couch and played video games and vaped, or whatever. Smoked pot all day, I think is what he was getting at there.
Well, that's what they're doing now. Now it's just smoke
vaping
pot.
wasn't a
and,
thing back in
and
your day.
collected a check from the government, or my parents, paid for my food, and I just did nothing. I mean, it just doesn't even. That wasn't an option.
Right.
And biblically, Paul says you don't work, you don't eat, and there are people that are incapable of working, and the fact that there are these programs of the church to come in and help these people that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about able-bodied people that just don't feel like working.
Yeah.
The laziness, slothfulness.
Yeah, I remember back in my day, 6 miles each way uphill in the snow.
Sure. Yeah.
When I was doing
You
chimneys.
did that too?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
When I was doing, this is one of those stories. When I was doing chimneys as a young guy with a couple young kids at home, and I was working 3 jobs, and I remember falling off a roof one day and breaking my ankle. And like there was no option even at that point. Like I didn't even think once like, oh, I need to figure this out so I can stay home and heal. Like I just worked with that broken ankle. I tied it up and I just worked, because there was no other option. And I mean, that's not, I'm not trying to like pat myself on the back, but that was the mentality is you do whatever you have to do, no matter what it feels like, to take care of what's yours. Right. And that is gone. Like it's just,
It's weird. It's weird that it can be. Like I don't know how that happened, but it's doable now.
Yeah.
For people just to not work.
Yeah, I mean, we're at a time in society where people are not engaged in the workforce. I forget the statistics, but there's more people, able-bodied people, that are not working that should be working than there ever has been.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I don't know how those people are surviving.
Right.
But
it's hard to know who's at fault exactly,
Right.
because you've got obviously the government is facilitating this, right? And yet, maybe the direction that the men have gone has dictated. Who knows?
Yeah.
Well,
Who
there's
knows who's
a
at fault?
bigger satanic kind of an overview of this thing of, again, I'm not going to go too crazy with this, but if you're going to break down the family and you're going to create this dependence,
For sure.
It's pretty effective. So if you've
been listening to Alec Jones,
it sounds a little that way, and I'm not. No, I haven't. But I mean, if you take away masculinity and you take away the desire to work and all these kinds of things, and you make that doable, now you've created a society that's utterly dependent.
you disarm
on the powers that be.
Yeah.
Yes.
And now they're in complete control of
sure.
you. Now it seems like freedom, which is it's not. I mean, you're like, I'm free. I can do
Yeah.
whatever I want. I don't have to work. I can,
This
but
is
it's not
great.
freedom. You're actually being enslaved to something and to someone, and we don't recognize that yet. But it's like at some point our eyes are going to be open. And it's like, oh no,
Yeah.
what have I given up here?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, part of not launching is, and the next one is that men aren't working, and we've been talking about that. I read a statistic. I think it was millennials will have up to 14 different careers during their lifetime right now. So just changing, not just changing jobs, but changing lines of work, from time to time. And I think of like my parents' generation and older, like you would have a job, and that's what
Yeah.
you would do, for your whole career. Like I think of my grandparents, they had, one job. They might have worked, different companies, but kind of one line of work. My folks were in one line of work,
Yeah.
for their careers. And that's just kind of what you did. And back to what you said earlier, Brent, about, people like trying to find their passion.
Right.
That sounds good, but, it's just another way to not be committed to something.
Well, and just the mindset of like, I remember thinking I was lucky to find a job. I was lucky
Yeah.
to find gainful employment. I was excited about it. So the idea that I would stay loyal to that company and keep, again, there are reasons to change jobs and to try new things.
Sure.
And there's times
Yeah,
when
it's not bad in and of
totally
itself.
makes sense to do that. But I didn't feel like, this was owed to me or whatever. It was like, I got this job. This is a blessing. I got to work hard to keep it, to advance myself in this company. And the longer I stayed and the harder I worked, I was getting somewhere in it. That I don't know that that's still, I remember trying to find employees, younger, and this isn't true of all younger people. Some younger people blow me away with their work ethic and how hard they work, and I'm amazed, So, but I remember some of these people, like, they wouldn't show up to work on time. They wouldn't. I mean, they were sick all the time. When they got there, they didn't do much,
Right.
and they were good with that. Very different,
Yeah.
Yeah, I know of a large landscaping company in Bend that I work with on various projects, and this was a couple of years ago, mid-pandemic, but they had 2 entire crews. I don't know how big their crews are, 5 or 6 people, but 2 entire crews that didn't show up one day, like the same day. 10 people didn't show up for work because of what you're saying, and the owner of this, one of the larger companies in Bend is out pushing a lawnmower because some young guys decided, I'm not going to go to work today.
Yeah.
Kind of crazy.
Well, and that it used to be that you just get fired for that.
Yeah.
And then they'd hire somebody else that was raring to go.
Right.
And
now
now
kind of
it's
the old
like-
adage, you can do anything you want on your last day of work.
right. But now if there's nobody's raring to go, then you got to work, it's kind of the
Right.
what we've created.
Work with what you got. Why does vocation matter for a man? Why does vocation matter to God?
I've been talking too much.
I feel like I just
just
stumped
think
you guys.
it's part of what it would, like David already mentioned. This was pre-creation or pre-fall. So when he cultivated or created the garden, men and women were there to cultivate it. Work is good.
There's
it's,
a nobility to work.
it's good for us.
Yeah, he put us here pre-fall to tend
Yeah.
and to create, like you're saying, and so
Yeah.
like it is good. We also know post-fall that idleness is like our enemy. Right?
Yeah.
Read through the Proverbs, and like that's just when bad stuff happens. If we're not being, we're meant to be productive. It's actually encouraging to us, and it's beneficial to the world around us.
Sure.
So yeah, we're meant to be proactive and creating things. So
Yeah,
it's
there's
part of why
still
we're
something
here.
about a hard day's work, a job done well,
Yeah.
whatever. It's just very satisfying, and it makes you feel like a man.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
I used to have the chimney business was extremely seasonal, and so it was feast and famine as far as busyness goes, and so for about 5 months it would just be ridiculous. Like I'd be going gangbusters and wouldn't know what end is up and couldn't catch my breath and work, and then the slow season would come and I'd be so excited, and about 2 weeks in, I would be miserable, and not just miserable, but like even depressed. Like my whole view of life and the way I would start thinking and everything would change that quick as a result of not doing something with my hands. And so it's simply not good for us to not be doing. It sounds great,
Right.
for a day or two, and
Yeah.
then it starts to take its toll on us. So yeah, we're meant to be productive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What does it look like? So the Bible talks about when we work that we would work as if we're working for God and not for men, right? And so we get paychecks, and there's a company name on your paycheck, but for the Christian, I think the Bible would advocate that ultimately your provision comes from God, right? Giving you the ability to work and provide for your family. And so at the end of the day, for the Christian, you work as if you're working for God and not for a man. What does that look like? What does it look like? Like, say you got a bad boss or a job that you don't like or whatever. How can the Christian work as if they're working for God and not for man?
Yeah, I think there's the idea that there's sacred and secular. I think we do this idea, the church is sacred, ministry is sacred, but work is secular. And if you can erase that idea and make it all sacred, it's all unto God. Everything we do to the glory of God.
Yeah.
That just changes your whole mindset. So
Sure.
when you go to work, you're there to serve your Lord and to glorify Him and honor Him and please Him, and regardless of who's around you,
Yeah.
it's like Jesus is coming, look busy kind of thing doesn't really work for the
Yeah.
Christian.
So have you ever had to like live that in a job that you didn't like?
Yeah,
Or
I
a
don't
boss
know.
that you didn't get along with? Or
Almost all the jobs I've had, even now, Chad. No, I'm just kidding.
Especially now.
No, I don't think any of us. I mean, work the fall and the curse of the fall was real. Work stinks, know, and there's times when you're sick and you're tired, you don't want to work, you got to
Right.
deal with crummy customers, all those kinds of things, and yet you just have to again do it to the glory of God and look to Him as the one that's going to get you through it, and He does.
Yeah, another part of the fall is that our attitudes can stink, right? And this is where worship, like knowing the difference between what we're doing and who we're doing it for, matters.
Right.
Because it's not just that we show up to work every day that matters, but how we do what we
Right.
do when we show up every day.
Agreed.
Like, matters, and so then it becomes worship, and so who we're doing it for, who's on our mind, like changes how we do that.
Yeah.
And then there's your testimony as far as
No, it's a
people
huge
know you're a
huge
believer.
testimony, yeah.
If you're always late for work, or if you kind of halfway it, I'm going to say it that way. Had another thing in my mind, fellas.
Half vape it.
Yeah, half do your job halfway, or just that all speaks to who you are as a Christian.
Totally
And
does.
so Christians should be the hardest workers, the
should be
faithful
the best
employees, the loyal
employees.
ones, the ones that aren't backbiting and gossiping and complaining and all those things.
Yeah.
That's part of our testimony. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember I've had lots of jobs over the years, and not all of them have been enjoyable. Not all of them have been with enjoyable people, and I've had plenty of time in my life where my approach to that probably wasn't great, but God has taught me over the years what it looks like for a Christian to maintain a job and have a boss and have under somebody's authority and those kinds of things, and these things matter to God. These things matter as our witness, as you guys talked about. Work is noble, even like what you would consider the most menial job. Like it matters to the Christian.
That's right.
Right? It matters to God how we approach the most menial of jobs, and that's kind of an epidemic in society where more and more people are withdrawing from the workforce.
Yeah. Even the mission aspect of it. I mean, if we're part of the Great Commission, whether you're going to church or to work or, to a soccer game or whatever you're doing, you're on mission. And so if you go to work thinking about, poor me, this, all this work, if you go there thinking about other people, the customers you're going to interact with, I mean, that's one of the things you miss the most about the chimney business
Yeah.
is all those connections you got to make while you were working your tail off. But it was like, it was
For sure.
mission.
Yeah.
First and foremost. That changes everything as well.
It
So,
does. And there's something about, when you have a Christian worldview about your job, there's something that makes it easier to get up in the morning and go to work when you realize like this is an act of worship to God, that I go to work and put in, a good day's work and do a good job. Even if it's not something I'm particularly fond of or people that I don't particularly like or whatever, there's just something satisfying about this, having a mindset that this is an act of worship to God, more
Yeah.
than it is anything else. Next one. So men are not marrying. We kind of touched upon this a bit already. That men are not marrying, and I just immediately, upon hearing that, think about the creation mandate in Genesis that He gives to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth, to subdue it, and have dominion over it. And that has more to do than with just marriage. But the first thing, be fruitful and multiply, right? God created Adam, and He created Eve, and He says it's not good for man to be alone, so He created Eve, and the two shall become one flesh and joined together, and then be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over it. Why do you suppose in society today that men are not marrying? Like
It's hard to
What drives that?
It's hard to stay on World of Warcraft all day if you're married. You know what I mean? Like,
There you
she's
go.
going to have a problem with that at some point.
I don't need two moms in my life. I'm just picturing the guy sitting in the basement doing nothing, you know,
Yeah.
and it's like, just, Mom, I'm busy, you know, and now it's like, why would I get married? You know, I'll have two people doing that.
Right.
I get to live here for free and do what I want.
There's two words like that come to my mind. Like, first, we've been talking about a lot is responsibility.
Sure.
Like that equals responsibility at certain levels to a certain extent. Second is commitment. Like we don't want commitment anymore,
Right.
And I know that responsibility and commitment kind of go hand in
Right,
hand,
hand in hand.
but those are like two. You know, those are of the devil to men in
There's a
our
third one.
world these days.
Third one that came to mind.
Yeah.
Lasciviousness.
Can you spell that word?
No, it's because guys don't, they want to basically be with as many women as they can and do what
That's
they
where I
want.
was just
Yeah.
going. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other reason.
Which
I mean, it's-
actually
it's-
marriage doesn't stop that anymore.
No.
Right.
No, but
Anyway,
the idea that you'd be
that's a whole
tied
nother subject.
down,
Yeah.
committed to one woman,
Yeah.
that's what you were talking about. But I mean, the
Yeah.
idea of, committed to one person that you have to be care for and be responsible for and, provide for, protect, all those things. Or you can be with multiple women and,
Right.
not have to worry about any of that stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. I think of another another one, ambition. It's just not an ambition these days to marry, to commit, have responsibility, raise a family. Like it's just not. It's a dying ambition, I think, or a lack of ambition. To build a family.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I didn't have a category for that when I was
No.
young. This is what you do.
That's what you do.
You get married, you have kids,
Right.
This was just
Unless you have the gift of singleness.
well,
But
true.
these people today that are not getting married, it's not because they have the gift of singleness.
No, I
because
mean
they're-
that Paul's admonition that in 1 Corinthians 7 that like if you can remain single, that's actually going to be,
Yeah.
and you're on mission for Christ, that's going to be better. You don't have to be dual minded as far as I've got this part of my life, this part of my life.
Right.
You can just be sold out for Christ and do that work. That's actually
Yep.
an admirable thing. But that's like you said, that's not why people are doing it
Right.
necessarily.
He actually gives in 1 Corinthians 7 as a real reason to get, like one of the primary reasons to get married, which Christians probably have a problem with this, is literally because you're burning with
Right.
passion.
Burning with lust.
like he actually says, like you need to go get married
Right.
if this is going on
Yeah.
with you. So the gift is that that's
outlet for
something
that
you're
passion.
able to tame rather than something that tames you.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
The gift of singleness. I mean, so yeah, I mean, no one pays attention to that. Obviously, I mean, we're going out and doing what we want with who we want because there's no consequence. There's no reason not
Right.
to. Like, why in the world would I get married when I just get all the benefits right now? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So obviously, it's a question of morality. There's a morality problem going on.
Yeah, and here we see from the very beginning that God's design is for marriage and family. Like it's just not debatable.
Well, and especially now, we look at the world getting worse, and there's a lot of Christians that say, "I don't want to bring kids into this world," and it's like, well, maybe that's the wrong
Yep.
thinking. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe we need to.
I mean, that's why we
to
should.
bring more Christians into this world,
Yep.
Right.
And continue to pass that baton to the next generation. Until the Lord returns. I mean, again, we want to see the kingdom expand, not shrink. So,
Yeah. Next one, and this we've already, we touched on this too, but men are not fathering, and this is
Oh,
has
yes, they
had,
are. We're just not-
well, yeah, men are not being in the role of father.
Yeah,
Maybe
there
they're
you go.
fathering, but they're not walking in the
Correct.
role of father. And this just has, like the dominoes have fallen in a bad way because men are not fathering.
I was going to say, as we move through all these, the dominoes are clear.
Yeah.
Like it's just like this connects to this connects to
Right.
this connects.
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
this.
It's all connected.
well, and even the what that does to a kid. You already talked about this, and I think it's just so important. But I mean, one of the things he talked about, and it just hit me kind of hard. You've got no father in the home, so you've got disciplinary problems going on the kid. And I've seen this firsthand. And I've got a specific scenario in mind. And then your immediate thought is, okay, I need to get this kid under control. There's no dad here, so what do I do? Well, you start turning to these pharmaceutical
Yep. Yeah.
solutions
Medicate 'em. Give 'em a
that,
pill.
that will kind of dull the kid down. So that
Yep.
when and it, again, there are scenarios out there where kids probably need to be
Right.
on something, but a lot of times it's just literally they're just misbehaving.
They're missing one of the most important factors of their
Yeah.
entire childhood.
And I can think back to being
which
a kid.
psychologically is just it's gonna change some stuff. And it's
Yeah,
not always
absolutely.
the case, like you said, but like that's
Correct.
a real gap.
But I just personally, I know when it was his mom around, and I did a lot of stuff I shouldn't have done. The minute Dad got home and he had that snap of his finger thing
Right.
went on, I knew playtime was over. It's like, okay,
Wait
I got
until your
to
father gets home.
exactly. And that's a real thing.
Yeah.
Dad wasn't going to put up with that. Mom, I could get away with some things, and but no. And so that father figure in a child's life is huge.
Yeah, the
and again,
structure.
the statistics play out. It's crazy to see the percentages
Yeah.
of what goes on in a young, child's life.
And those
that doesn't have a
statistics,
father.
they're not even debatable.
No.
I mean, it's clear that there's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fatherlessness.
Yeah.
I can't remember the statistic, but I read quite a while back that inmates, like the number of inmates that didn't have a father in the home is huge. I mean,
No, it's not coincidental.
90%.
it's-
a big number. I forget what
Yeah.
it was, but big number.
Yep.
And it's interesting because God identifies as Father, right? Throughout Scripture, He's Father.
We'll even
right?
think about how much it's changed our lives once we got that father in our life. like
Yeah.
even, I mean, not to get weird spiritually, but like kind of the direction you're going. Like when I look at myself, pre-Christianity and pre-adoption, post-adoption,
Yeah.
like it's amazing how much having that relationship with God the Father in my life has changed my life, has
Yeah.
changed my thoughts, has changed my desires, right? And I know that's a spiritual equivalent,
Even your security,
but it's real.
your-
It's
your,
like real.
Your security, all the things, like I have a father who loves me.
Yeah.
And it's like, it just changed who I was as a man.
And he's
Yeah.
teaching us things that we
Yeah.
didn't know before as a good loving father, and like all of it's happening.
Yeah.
The nourishing, the protection, the security that we have,
Yeah.
the love, like all of it's in place, and the proof is in the pudding. Like sanctification is the reality of the relationship of having that father in our
Right.
lives.
Well, and the other side of that coin is when we became fathers, what it did to us.
Totally.
To have little kids that relied on us, looked up to us.
You kinda
That-
grow up pretty quickly.
My goodness. Well, it changes your priorities. I can't be
Yeah.
about myself anymore. I mean, you can, but you're going to be a really
I grew up
lousy parent.
overnight.
Oh, yeah, you have to.
When that first kid came, I held him. It just changed so many
Right.
things.
I mean, I guess
immediately.
that's the point I want to get at is that, like, we're not just trying to beat people up or make them feel bad.
Maybe a little
God's a little bit, sure, well, to some degree. That's not the only reason. No, God's design and plan works. It's
real.
It's
Yeah.
real. It matters. What He's put in place for us is good.
It is the best for us.
Yeah, it's like a blueprint for life for us to build.
The world's
a successful
telling us
life.
it's not, but it's the best.
No,
Yeah,
you're
for us.
not aimless anymore. You've got a direction. You've got a purpose. You've got all these things. It just benefit.
Yeah, and the responsibility of it all can seem kind of daunting.
Yeah,
right?
overwhelming. No.
But to your point, like this is God's design for human flourishing.
Yeah,
right.
And
And
it
it's the
just
best
works.
way
Yeah.
to do it God's way.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So fatherlessness is an epidemic. Big time. In our society throughout the world, but I think particularly in America. How would you? I'm going to jump ahead to a question that I have more towards the end, but it kind of fits here. Like, how would you encourage older men in the church? Like, we've kind of been speaking towards younger men, and some of these things. How would you encourage older men in the church to help the younger men with these kinds of things?
I would tell them to help the younger men.
I mean, the Bible tells us that, right? That it's the job of the older
course.
men and the older women
We're
to
seeing that
invest
right
in
now.
the younger men and younger women.
We're seeing that right now, like even in our congregation, where a lot of older retired couples that have done their time are stepping up to the needs of
Yeah.
the younger couples that are coming in with younger kids, and it's such a cool thing to see. I mean, it's just biblical. Timothy says this about the older women to the younger women.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they have so much to offer. They're farther up the hill.
Right.
There's wisdom that's been accumulated. So yeah, I mean they need to know that just because they're retired and just because their kids are no longer in the home, and they have 10 grandchildren that they get to see at Christmas time, that they still have a vital role
Yep.
in the church. They have a vital ministry in the church, and that ministry is to to come alongside the younger family.
Yeah, I looked
Yep.
at some of the comments in the video of the YouTube video of the guy preaching these things, and there were so many guys that said, "I wish somebody would have told me this 20 years ago." Like they were hearing things they'd never heard before, and I
Yeah.
thought, how could you not know this stuff? There's a whole generation and a generation coming up behind that one that don't know this stuff. They believed what the world has had to tell them.
Yeah.
Sit down, be quiet. Don't be masculine. So the worst thing you can be is and it's like, no, to hear something different than that is important. And the older generation in the church can come alongside these people and disciple them
Yeah.
into these things and let them know why it's important. And so there's, this is a big deal.
But I think for our generation, well, like me and David, you're an older generation than us, Brent. But
I think we're in the same generation.
Okay.
Are you a millennial?
No, I'm not a millennial.
Then we're
Are
the
you
same.
Gen X?
I'm Gen X.
Yeah. Okay. We're all the same then. Sorry, Brent.
Cheers.
Anyway, like we've had these things, modeled to us to a certain extent, just because
Yeah.
society, kind of bought into these ideas. But kind of younger generations, like society doesn't buy into these ideas anymore. So, part of the reason that maybe, kind of younger generations aren't aware of some of these things is because it's not being modeled for them.
Right.
And so that's where, older men in the church, which I guess we're older men in the
Same
church.
with women and with younger women.
Yeah.
It's the same stuff. This has to be modeled and taught and
Yeah.
and for them to see it working. And you look at the people you admire, the marriages you admire. Well, how did they get there? Look at the people who have raised their kids successfully. How did they get there?
Yeah.
And if we have a chance to jump in their back pocket and learn from them,
Yeah.
we need to.
Yeah.
And this goes back to what you were saying earlier, like the success of the unicorn. Like it may be a unicorn to see a lifelong marriage. It may be a unicorn to see a really good dad doing what he should be doing in the day and age in which we live. But like it makes a statement. Like as many as are there, like makes a statement. Like they need to be seen. They need to exist, even if it's few, so that people can
Right.
see something that's completely odd. Because the more we go down the slippery slope, the more odd it's going to be.
Right. We're swimming up.
Possibly have effect again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just because of
But
how
when the world
peculiar it
sees,
is.
when the failing world, the broken world sees marriages that are working,
Yeah.
the roles that God has given being
Yeah.
accepted and championed, children being raised in the fear and admonition of the Lord.
Yeah.
Older. I mean, when they begin to see these things, the testimony, the bright light that
Exactly.
that is going to shine out of it for the gospel, again, for the again, this is Great Commission stuff, is a big deal.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that because like we're talking about a lot of, like you said, there was this wasn't real gospel centered.
Yeah.
This clip that this guy did, and of course we're talking about a lot of things that are problems and realities that are not real like people need a changed heart.
Yes.
Like we can't just
Right.
go to young men with each of the points that we've talked about and go, you need to do this.
Try harder
you
to
need
be
do
better.
this.
Right.
Like
That's not the message.
like it would be valid, like a valid truth, like, yeah, stop doing this, but
Yeah.
but that's just moralism.
Right.
Like there has to be a shifting of worldview. There has to be a shifting of
Yep.
the lens in which you view everything around you, including it starting with yourself, right?
Absolutely.
And all the lies that we have consumed that build our worldview, right? So the gospel is how we combat these things, and it's got to.
Well, and all of that will build a good society. I mean, I don't deny that.
It just
you
is,
put all
yeah.
that into place, and it'll build a good society. It won't change a person's eternity.
It's not going to change.
and even the desire to be that person probably isn't. I don't know. I don't think I would have had that desire apart from Christ in me.
for sure.
So the fact that I wanted to be a good husband and be a good dad and follow this mandate and do these things,
Yeah.
unto to His glory, that's because Christ is in me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, if there's a young man out there listening and thinking, I want to have that. This is first and foremost, bow before your Lord and
Yeah.
ask Him for help because this
Yeah.
stuff's hard.
Yeah.
And I understand
Right
why
on.
people want to avoid it, but when He's there, with you going through these things, it's the most rewarding. I can't think of things that are. I love being a husband. I love being a dad. I love being a grandpa. It's better than anything else I've done as far as sharing the Lord with people might be up there as well. Obviously, seeing somebody come to Christ, but these are like more than career or anything else. These are the highlights of
Right.
of life, and they're eternal things. These things matter eternally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the last one,
There's
is,
more?
yeah, there's one more, is that men are not leading. And again, all these things are interconnected, but, I think we would all advocate for, male leadership in the home and in the church, maybe even largely in society. But what does it look like for men to lead? And you kind of touched upon, gospel worldview, gospel-centered worldview. How can men first and foremost lead their families in this? How should men lead their families?
I mean, I would say right now we've got a pretty clear picture of what it looks like for men not to lead.
Yep.
And it's kind of, I don't know. heartbreaking
Yeah.
to see kind of where men are afraid to lead now, afraid to stand up and be men, and afraid to do it in a godly way. Again, we're not talking toxic
Right.
garbage. We're not talking about chauvinism. We're talking about Christ-like, masculinity and leading in your home. And first and foremost, I mean, being the provider. I think we get those kinds of things. The protector, but the spiritual leader aspect is, I think, where most of us fall
Sure.
down.
Yeah.
It's been the hardest for me.
Yeah. So first and foremost, lead your family to Christ,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it comes back to the two words I thought about earlier: assume the responsibility and commit. Like, if you do those two things, then you're going to lead.
Yeah.
And it's not always going to be well, but you can learn to lead well if you're committed and you're assuming responsibility.
Right.
Then at least you got that down.
One of
That's
the-
the part. That's what we're not doing.
But one of the easiest ways to do it as a guy is get your family to church.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
It's just like it just baffles me how many.
Yeah.
How sporadic people are as far as this goes, but that was one of the easiest ways for me to lead my family. It was hard to do daily devotions. It was hard to do, be consistent with praying at night and things like that. But the one thing I could do week in and week out
Right,
was
get to
get my
church every
family to
week.
church and make that a priority.
Yeah.
And that, like, if you're going to pick one thing, that's a pretty good one to pick.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And speaking of how can men lead in the church? Like, what does that look like for men to lead within the church?
Looks like a lot of things, Chad.
I know. And then we just got a few. I'm
don't
kind
you
of
just
brief
tell
because we.
What's the answer he wants?
And I'm not talking about like we could kind of, this would be another podcast for another time to talk about, male elders and those kind of, like, I'm not necessarily thinking that right now. I'm just thinking in general and kind of in a broad sense.
Yeah.
What does male leadership in the church look like?
I know what it should look like, and
Yeah.
it should look like men who are consumed with being subject to Christ and under the headship of Christ. I was just
Yep.
reading like the succession that we're given, by Paul in like 1 Corinthians 11 about, it's the famous section on head coverings, and everyone always
Yeah.
goes, what's the head coverings here? What is that thing? But what the most important part is the actual succession of headship that Paul actually goes through there, where he says, I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ, right? And the head of a wife is her husband. I know we don't like this. It has nothing to do with toxic masculinity. It's just God's perfect plan, right? And the head of Christ is God the Father, obviously. And so there's this sequence
Yeah.
that God has ordained. And so in the church, it is that men are consumed with, regardless of what everyone else is doing, Christ, being under his authority, being under his headship, learning from him, right? Being conformed into his image. That's what matters most. And of course, the whole reason we see everything that we talked about today is because the succession's been
Right.
broken down, like even with women to men and all
Yeah.
that stuff. But that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, I mean,
no, that's good.
if men are consumed with themselves underneath the headship of Christ, that just changes a lot of things.
Little things fall into place.
Makes you even worthy of following, maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
for women.
Sure.
I think one of the things we try to do strategically at the door is put men in positions to lead. And so we do that, whether it's community groups, home groups, Bible studies, sharing time that we do, the praise and prayer time. We ask men to do that. We hand them the baton of leadership and say, you
Yeah.
go up and lead. Because I think it's foreign to men these days, or you almost feel like you can't, I'm not qualified or equipped, or I can't do this. But that's to be able to, I've watched that over and over again. We ask some guy to lead sharing time, and they have this almost, me?
Yeah.
Like I can do this. It's like, yeah, you can. And it's amazing to see this kind of pep in their step when they, all of a sudden it's like, hey, I can stand up before the church and do something. It's like, yeah, you can.
Yeah.
For so long it's just been kind of the women that have been.
Well, you and I went to a
Active
church
in
that did
church.
this really well, and I hated every bit of it, but they actually required men to
Yeah.
step up and teach, and we all had assigned like points on the calendar where it was our turn. And it wasn't pretty a lot of times, you know what I mean? Like it was a wreck.
Yeah.
Some of these guys weren't meant to teach, but the whole point was like, you guys can and should be the ones like leading the charge spiritually in the church with everybody, your wife, your kids, and that church really did that well.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
They kind of made us feel the weight of responsibility, and it was right. Not everyone teaching was right, but
Sure.
but the weight of responsibility was right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Since we just got a couple of minutes, briefly, how can Christian men lead in society? So if you think about, particularly, like we've been kind of speaking mostly towards young men today. So like for the young men that are at work right now, that they get up every day and go to their job. How can those young men, in the context of their Christian worldview, lead in society?
I guess I'd go back to what I said already. The idea just that you work hard, you show up on time, you're a good citizen, you're a good employee, stellar in those regards. Like people, hey, you're different than the other people.
Yeah.
So in all your interactions publicly, whether it's the grocery store, the gas station, work, whatever it is, that you're an ambassador of the Most High King, and
Yeah.
you act that way. So
Yeah, I would say the same thing that we already said, like that it's how you do what you do. Like that's how you lead in society. Is
Yeah, it absolutely matters.
Yeah, you do what you do right. Yeah.
And I think being willing to engage in society is okay.
Yeah,
We don't,
absolutely.
oftentimes we try to be like a monastery on a hill and just
Separatists.
separate ourselves from the world. And it's like, no, we have an opportunity to go in and be. I love it when I see Christians getting involved in non-Christian
Yep.
groups and things that are not ministries, but things that are going on.
Yeah.
And they're actually missionally taking an opportunity to go in and kind of, I don't know, infiltrate that group for Christ. It sounds kind of
That's good. Just
Sounds
first
covert,
and foremost,
but
just
yeah.
to be in society,
Yeah.
to be present and
Yeah.
to be engaged,
Yeah.
right? That's,
As an
it
ambassador,
matters.
as
an ambassador of Christ.
yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely matters. Okay, well, we've beat up some young men. We've maybe beat up some of the older men a little bit.
I thought that was super tame.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was far more tame than the clip that we watched.
Could have
gotten worse.
Any last encouragement to just men in general, old or young, anywhere in between?
I just think of the gift of what God has given us and distinct men and distinct women as far as gender and roles and stuff like this. When you do embrace it and stop kicking against it and see it as a gift from God, that it's actually very good. It just changes everything, And I'm grateful that men have to stand before God one day and give a greater answer for how they've led their families, how they've loved their wives, all those things. It's an awesome privilege and an awesome responsibility. So, take it seriously.
Yeah. I was thinking the same word, embrace.
Yeah.
Like the world's telling you that maybe you should be ashamed of who you are, or maybe you should question it and think about it. I would say embrace it, and don't be ashamed about who God's made you.
Sure.
Play the part and play it well.
Yeah. I think one of the most noble, courageous things is to walk in God's design, both for maleness and femaleness, and to do it with boldness and courage.
Yeah, for sure.
Trusting that God got it right.
For sure.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, when do you guys want to pray, and we'll call it a day.
Sure. Lord, thank you for this time. Thank you for this subject, even though it may be difficult. We thank you that your design is right once again, not wrong, that it is there for blessing, extended blessing, not just to us, but those around us when we do things according to your design. We thank you for adopting us. We thank you for being a good father. We thank you for sending your son who showed us what it looks like to be a good man. And we would just ask for strength and courage to walk in the things that you've shown us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. We'll see you all next week.